Yeah. Anyways. Okay, so what was I going to start with? I forget now.
See, we can already cut this part.
I wouldn't cut this part. I think it's organic and authentic.
Okay.
So even speaking of that, when you direct films, do you wait for something organic to happen, or do you want to get in there right away and facilitate what you want to pop from the script?
I think it would depend on. It kind of depends on the project and like what am I practicing with that project. So some of the things that I've made were a lot more pre-planned, and I kind of go into them with like it's never like trying to like super really attached to achieving a very specific thing, but sometimes if I have pre-planned something, it's just like the elements of that thing are so in place that then I think they have a lot of impact on what that image is that we capture. Where then some of the projects which have been more improvised are just like it's just a looser plan, so there's more room for something organic to arise, like if it's from the actor or from the cinematographer, or...
So it's like intentional if it's you want like something organic to happen.
It's like it's intentionally making space for something organic to happen.
When did you start to notice yourself doing that in your career as a director, where you might did you start out directing saying, I'm going to make space for this person's performance, or I have a very like laser focused idea of how this is going to happen?
I think that my first idea of like what would be skillful as a creative person would be to have like a very specific vision that you then use people as not tools, but you kind of
human
like
props. Is that
it was like a more unsophisticated way of understanding like collaboration, that like I was looking at directors like Wes Anderson or like people who are so pre-visualized and so controlling, and and kind of holding that as like, oh, that's what like skillfulness in general is to like put your stamp on something so strongly, like no one else could have made this image because I controlled every aspect of it. And then I kind of evolved out of that more, and in seeing that like there definitely is like something should be your idea should be grounded, so you can like as a director you can be the person that can tell if things are aligned or not, but you can still do that and still make space for like other influences and for people really to bring themselves into that process. And that's just a more interesting way to do it, also just more honest. I think it's more evolved.
Yeah. Do you think that the controlling aspect, or like trying to put your stamp on something and say, haha, this is mine, does that become problematic at all, or is that useful in a process?
I think that I guess it would depend, but I think that energy can be really distorted. Like that energy comes from a lot of ego. I think it makes it difficult to actually like be aware of what's happening on the set. It makes it difficult to actually see like possibilities. It makes it difficult to see what other people are bringing to something, because you are just viewing everything through the lens of like if that is what I'm thinking of or not. Like you're only viewing things like so narrowly on like a yes or no. You know, so the energy can be really distorted. I think there's like a balance to it because I also think like it's good to be grounded in what you're doing. It's good to have a compass and be able to like not just be like, oh, you want to do that? Cool, whatever. You want to do this?
Yeah,
cool,
to be flippant
whatever.
about everything.
Like, all right, y'all want to do this? Like, mash it together.
Yeah.
What do we got? Like, like,
we'll see what happens.
I wouldn't really do that. But yeah, exploring, be curious about the different way that something could be grounded and still be fluid.
Yeah.
I think that's exciting. Like, that's an exciting thing to practice.
Yeah. I mean, it's almost, it sounds like when like bands play together, like it's like you can have an idea for a song, but if you're cemented to it, like then where do you leave any room for improvisation or somebody to do something surprising?
And it's just kind of like, why are you really sure that your idea is the best one? Like, I liked it when somebody said, like, sometimes you have your first idea and then you have the right idea. Like, you,
that's a good way of putting it.
You have to, like, make room for this evolution. There's no, just sticking to an idea in itself, the only function that really has is to kind of build up your ego and, like, you to get more calcified and you to get more sure about, like, I'm on the right path and I'm gonna do this and this is the vision. Okay.
And what influenced you to kind of let go of that ego or let go of that control going into directing, which is presumably a very control centered occupation? What has influenced you to kind of like give a little?
I think it was just like a process of it was just kind of a process of exploring. So I did my Sleeping Beauty movie Earth, and that was like the largest team I had worked with, and it was a lot of people that I hadn't worked with before, and we kind of gathered it together pretty fast. But I still had that really pre-visualized. Like I was like really clear and like really specific on how I wanted it. So then the whole process of making that film was like just using a certain kind of energy. Like it was super fun. I loved making that movie, but it was just like a very specific kind of energy to use and apply to something, and like a very specific way to try to create that, like just raise the question, like, is this the only way to create? Because it's a lot of effort. It's like a lot of effort and a lot of control. And so after I made that movie, I was more curious to like play with something more and feel like I'm playing while I'm making a movie, more so like when I'm little, when I
like as a kid.
And so I had also always liked the Dogma 95 movies, which I don't know if you know them or if maybe not everybody knows them. No. But it's like a movement that happened in Denmark in the 90s when they were trying to set themselves apart from Hollywood, who was like spending all this fucking money. And it's like a little aspect of Sour Grapes, but it was also like, well, I always viewed it as a little aspect of Sour Grapes, but it was like, here's how we're gonna do, and they were like critiquing Hollywood, that Hollywood is spending these enormous millions and millions of resources, and the premise of filmmaking for Hollywood is to create like an illusion. So like the value of film for Hollywood is to create an illusion. And the premise of like this movement was like the value of film is to reveal what is already true. So we don't need money to do that. So they basically like made these 10 rules you have to follow to make this really like minimalist type of filmmaking, and it's to like eliminate like the illusions of filmmaking. So you can't like use extra lighting. You can't like bring props onto the scene. You can't fake anything. Like there's no special effects. Like nobody could pretend to be hurt. If they're hurt, they really have to get hurt.
They gotta get hurt. Oh God. And kill the man on film.
You choose. Well, it kind of is a weird area, because then some of the films are like violent or weird, and then that's an aspect of it. It's like, oh, we've filmed this really happening. But just this series of rules, and the camera has to be handheld, and like you have to choose a set that like has everything you need. You can't bring costumes, or you can't bring props onto the set. So it creates this totally different process. And I made my tiny movie new.
Yeah.
Just with 2 other people following all of those rules. And it was so fun.
Yeah.
It was so fun. And we shot it in like 4 hours. I edited it in like 6 hours. And from like the time that I wrote it to its first screening, it got into MSPIF. And that whole timeline was 6 months.
Wow.
So I had never like flipped something that fast to screening before.
Yeah.
And they're just like it was totally painless, totally effortless. I had like one pre-production meeting where I showed people the script, but we didn't practice it. Like it was so fun, and like I really liked like what came out of it and how the performances came out of it. So I guess it is just like a practice of playing or like trying things like that like what will that show you about process, like actively trying process is different ways to find out like when is this valuable, or when do you want more structure again, or when do you want more fluidity. And once you finished New within 6 months, were people saying, well, where's the feature in a year? You just turn that around? Did you start to like question like, well, I could really turn things around really quick? Yeah. And I think there are places that you could turn things around really quick. What actually happened in this specific context was that like it was soon after I shot New and flipped it around that I like became really blocked for the first time ever. So then I didn't like finish any of my
like writer's block,
editor's block. So I had all these projects in post-production, like the Elemental series. And then I shot after I shot New, I shot Fire a few months later. But then I had Fire, Earth, and Air all in post-production and not editing them. That was sort of unrelated.
So you filmed an entire series called Elemental, and it's based on Disney stories.
It's based on folklore, fairy tales.
Which Disney stories are based on folklore, if anything. Anyways, it's just like stuff that can't be trademarked when you think about it. So you based it on folklore, and what was your intent going into it?
Do you want to specify that question at all?
Like, I mean, for me as an audience member, I could say, it has a less male-centered, masculine, high-lit, almost, think of the word for it, giving the pass on dangerous behavior that can cause people pain, and kind of giving the other side of that, as opposed to this romanticized version of masculinity and femininity, or how we perceive relationships, and how we perceive relationships to be ownership in some ways. But I know that there's even, you could say the verb is to Disneyfy. What would the reverse be? What would the reverse be to what your approach was for Elemental?
Yeah. So I guess I could talk about like what things that series came out of. Yeah. Because I was working on it for a long time, so my understanding of it also like shifted over time. Yeah. When I was starting to make it, it was kind of just, it was sort of like actually really personal. And I was thinking about the way that like certain things in my life were reflected in like some of the messaging or like the premises. or like the core beliefs of like fairy tales and those old stories. And even though I could like logically see that and see what was wrong with it, I could still see it reflected in my life, and that like I'm struggling with this shit. So it was kind of like a way to how could I express something, or like look at like the fairy tale, and beyond going to like we all kind of get it, like, oh, we don't need a knight in shining armor or whatever. There are certain things that we all get like that. But it was more about like, okay, even if on one level I understand this is superficial and this is toxic and this messaging is like so outdated and whatever, like what are the things that are actually still showing up? Like what are like the core belief actually still showing up in like that I'm struggling with? And how could I distill that and like show that in like the tiny moments? So just in a couple of minutes, like show like, oh, this fairy tale about the Little Mermaid, or this little thing about this, like it's operating on this singular premise that's actually still difficult for me. Like, so it was really personal in that way. And then it's also on, I always saw them that because they were just kind of pretty emotional, and they're also like ambiguous, that they can really serve to be there's a lot of layers in each of them. There's like a lot of ways that I've thought about them. That's even why it's hard to talk about the intentions, because I've approached that from a lot of different aspects. Like I've approached it from the personal aspect, or from just like how is white supremacy, how is patriarchy in this, or like how it's also just like about, I don't know, ideas about magic or nature or different things, and process wise they were always like a way for me just to practice the craft, to try something different, to try working with different people. So there's like a lot of intentions with them.
I guess so. I understand when you say, could you be more specific? I guess I was harping more on the sociological like message behind them, or what was being presented, because the idea is that in the casting, in the representation, even in the crew, I was on set for one of them, it seems like it all encompassed this intention of more representation of people of color and non-male bodies, in the set, on the set, both sides of the camera. Would that be true?
Well, I think it's obviously on set of Fire, there actually are a lot of men.
Okay. Well, yeah, I mean, look at the cast. I mean, okay, yes, the dwarves. Yeah.
So I think it is a lot about femininity. Like, to me, it's about femininity in kind of a really broad way, in a way more so that's like, what are all the ways like a feminine principle is present like in all of us as humans, and then also like how have we disregarded that even as a principle. So like that's part of why like the pictures are so ambiguous, because a part of like a principle of femininity is like ambiguity and uncertainty versus like an absoluteness. So I think that it's like, it's so dangerous. Like I was thinking of this throughout the process of making them, and just like, what is the impact of disregarding like something that's actually kind of half the world?
Yeah.
So that is then in everything. And then if you try to like cut out like half of everything, including like half of like every person.
Yeah.
and there's certain qualities we associate with femininity, whether it's in men or women, that or other gender people, non-binary people, or what, gender fluid, like just cutting, like shitting on the whole principle of femininity. That's what I think is like so dangerous. We lose a lot of ourselves. Like we lose a lot of ourselves by doing that, and just lose a lot of our experience by doing that, and by not being able to talk about that.
And so moving forward, then, by not cutting that out and adding it in, is that part of the exploration that, I guess, by adding it in for your career, have you ever been surprised what happens when it's present as opposed to cut out? When you keep femininity in a narrative or even on a set, and you don't cut it out, you acknowledge it. Have you been surprised by what happens, like with some of the projects you've worked with?
I guess like a really, even like a basic way for me to talk about that was on my first set that I specifically tried to make it 50-50. Yeah. And it was kind of a big enough set that was obvious. Like I think it was like 16 or 17 people. So it was a different presence. And it was like so cute because what? It just was very cute because I didn't, like, the difference was really subtle in a way. It's like, for me, in directing that team, I'm just getting so much more feedback of, like, if I ask someone to, like, just trusting feedback from the team. Yeah. So I think most people have been respectful with me, I would say. Most. And but the thing that's actually like a little harder to quantify is this aspect of like just a baseline of trust on a set. Yeah. So, and somebody might like in himself perceive that as like, I always question the director. Yeah. Or like, you know, whatever they want to like frame it as. But it's this difference of like, you kind of just know the difference when you experience it over and over again, where it's like, at some level, we need a base level. I need you to like believe on some kind of base level that I have put like fucking like work, like I've thought about this. Oh yeah. I'm not just pulling this out of like wherever. Yeah. Like, so to move forwards, like until I so prove myself totally incompetent, why is there this assumption of incompetence? Like, and when it was half the women, oh, it's so sweet. They were just so trusting. They were. That's gotta be so nice. They were so trusting, and they were like even above and beyond. Like they were just like, oh, Simone, do you need this? Do you need coffee? Like, aside from like doing all their other work, they were just nicer. And like that could also be, you know, not everyone is gonna. It's people are individuals still, but like that in that specific team, I just remember like, oh my God, this set is so much easier because like if I just ask for something, it's not this like waited pause and then I'll do it reluctantly. Like it's just like I mean,
how much tougher is it for you to do your job with that resistance versus without it? And moving forward, would you ever want to risk having resistance on set like that?
Oh, that's a good question. I mean, it's a lot harder. Yeah. So I think that there's still an aspect of me that is like kind of like creating like some kind of false like a binary in my head that it's like it's either of like maybe I have to sign up for that because are those people more masterful Like, are those is it like a choice between people who are more experienced and more skillful, or people who will just more fully work with me, like, without... So, I mean, I don't know. I think that in itself is really, like, fucked up, that equation or that kind of question is still in my head a little bit. But especially, like, living in this town, it's sometimes it feels like, and I don't know if this is my imagination or, like, as a white person, I'm so segregated, and, like, as an introvert, I'm less likely to network, or, like, I don't want to go to the industry because there's certain things I just, like, okay, we won't get into that.
No, it's okay. You can if you want.
But
I mean,
I lost my train of thought.
What?
I lost my train of thought.
No, well, I was going to go back to what you were saying. Like, is blind trust synonymous with inexperience? Like, and if that's the case, how scary is that? I mean, like, if somebody trusts me.
No, it's not that. It's that, like, I find that, like, at least in the people I have found so far, if my priority is to work with people of color and women, which men of color, in my experience, people of color or men of color, regardless of gender, it's still a little bit more likely to have some kind of conception of that trust dynamic. It's more likely. And this isn't, like, totally across the board, because there could be white men who are, like, really have put a lot of work into this and a lot of self-interrogation and are, you know, you're able to navigate with them. I would say that it's like, if my priority is making my sets women and people of color, or, like, non-male people, it limits the pool.
In Minnesota,
in this town.
No doubt.
And I don't think it actually limits it as much as I think that it does. So that is the thing that I would encourage people to just, like, take more time with, because you might just need to put a little bit more time into something and not find your crew. Like, yes, it's hard to interrupt a status quo if you're trying to do it in 2 seconds. Like, if you have to shoot your movie tomorrow and it's like, all the people I know are white. What else am I supposed to do? Because actually what you had to do was, like, actually put in some other work, and preferably, like, years of work that you could actually expand your circle in ground up ways.
And then also, what does it say about that person if all the people they know are white?
Exactly. Like, there's a reason all the people that you know are white. Like, because what you haven't done is expanded yourself outside of your community. And that would actually be the first step, although it's a longer, slower process, rather than finding the one person you don't know that's white and being like, hey, you know anyone who's in film? I'm trying to diversify myself. Like, that
sounds like a cheap way of going about it.
Well, it is, but yes, that is a cheap way of going about it. And at the same time, you need to make some kind of steps, like, and you're probably going to do it clumsily. Like, you're probably going to do it in a clumsy way at first. You're probably going to do it harmfully. And, like, that should be taken with humility. That, like, you also, just because you're trying and you're, like, have the best intentions in the world, like, you're probably still going to be harmful, because now you don't know how to make your set safe for people of color, but you just want them to come on so that you're not racist anymore. Like, so I don't know, there's just, like, a lot of humility to be taken there, but it's also, like, you have to start the work. Like, you have to try, and part of that, to my original point, was, like, that takes time. So don't use the excuse that, like, of convenience. Of just, like, everyone that I know is men. So we asked the one, like, Jenna Lee was busy.
Yeah. Well, it generally does audio. Well, like you said, one of the most important things to me that I think somebody's ever said to me in film, when I had put out a film called Best One Sung from the Gutter, and then a woman in the audience said, why are there no black females in this film? And, you know, I told her, I said, hey, we reached out to a black actress and she was going to come. Then she got booked for something that paid. And I remember you telling me, and you were like, okay, well then why does the buck stop there? Like, where's the rest of the work? And I initially got a little bit like frustrated with you. And I was like, well, I did the work. I reached out to a black female. And then as I went about it more and did a little more, did more projects, I thought to myself, then I had another project that came up and I needed a black female for it. And I swear I went through at least 4 to 5 to 6, maybe 7 black females. Some of them that said they could show up and then had to reschedule.
Females.
I said what?
Okay, go on.
Black females? Did I say that
Just
wrong?
the way that you're saying it.
Black females. Them. No. But I mean, like, the idea is that...
Okay.
I'm getting schooled again. And I kept remembering the conversation that we had, and I thought to myself, oh, wow, I'm really worn down looking for a black female to fill this part. And then I thought to myself, okay, yeah, but why is that an excuse to just say, well, let's just throw somebody else in there? I don't care. You know, like, so that conversation stuck with me, and you saying this right now, I think it's one of the most important tools right now to like storytelling, because the people that you include in it are so important. The bodies that you put there are so important, and the bodies that you know are so important in your life. And the idea is that when filmmakers say, well, I couldn't find a gosh darn, you know, a brown gentleman that speaks, you know, this language, when it's like, well, then what does that say about your life experience, or, you know, who you've put in front of you throughout your life?
Yeah. And I think it's like a lot, it's like there's so much that you can look in there, because it's also like, okay, now we have sort of less money, less time, and we're trying to fill all of our side roles with black women. Yeah. Because the main people aren't black women. Yeah. And we didn't go through, like, you know, that already is information. Yeah. It's already information about the kind of story that you're telling. Yeah. Like, and so... yeah, I think there's just like a lot of... film to me is interesting because it's kind of this simultaneous thing where like you could take a film that somebody made and it has a lot of information about their unconscious intentions. Or like if you look at the like history of cinema in this country, you can see that that's a white supremacist patriarchal country by our movies. Even though nobody went in saying, I'm going to put racism in this movie. Yeah. And I'm going to put misogyny in this movie. Like, it's just in it, like, regardless. But at the same time as showing that unconscious premises, you also can actively interrupt some of that. Like, you can interrupt that and change it and have control over aspects too. So it's this kind of simultaneous thing that's like a lot like being a person, where we have our conditioning and then we have what we are aware of and we have like how to interrupt that. So a film to me is like, that's one of the most valuable things that it can offer, is that kind of reflection. And because it is powerful to take the time to interrupt what is a toxic and harmful and oppressive like premise and assumption.
And do you believe you achieved that in Elemental by interrupting?
I think like that's a great. I think Elemental is like a very obviously made by a white woman.
Okay. Yourself. Yes.
Yeah. So what I've thought since that Elemental is that like I totally avoid, almost completely avoid engaging with race in that series, because what I was trying to do, it's just a very unsophisticated like approach to race, and you can see that, like you could see it's like a you can just see it's like a white girl did this, because like what I was trying to do is make a series about femininity, womanhood, and
is it like funny to reflect on it? Because
it's funny because all of my like shit is like so obvious in it. But so the one thing that I was consciously trying to do is like, okay, I don't want this to be about white womanhood. I want it to be an archetype of womanhood, which totally failed, like even in the understanding of gender. But so then it's this kind of backwards approach where I'm trying to erase race by making it
by putting bodies of color in it,
diverse. And so in one way it kind of still works in that like the material is folklore anyway, so it already has this premise of like stereotype or archetype, or like you don't have to go deep, like it's stylized. So there's just not a lot of talking, there's not a lot of like, except for in Fire, but like in the most part it's not like a lot of talking. If you notice, the one woman who talks a lot throughout the whole series is in Water, the one that's about a white woman.
She talks the most.
So the people who would actually talk the most in that series is a white woman, me, and the black men, like the black and brown men. So even that's kind of like information.
So about the person creating.
And like what I get criticized on Elemental is I got criticized 3 different times about body diversity and my fat phobia, because in like the so-called diverse representations of women they're all like still small. Like, so there's like plenty you could like look at, and I wouldn't say that like I would say what is valuable about Elemental is that like, because I thought about it a lot from a lot of different or chose things. I chose a lot of things really intentionally, and I made it over time, so it's this sort of slow evolution, and because of that I think it is a useful like catalyst for conversation. There's a lot of conversation to be had about that. There's a lot of different ways that you could talk about it. There's a lot of different questions you could ask about it. There's a lot of things to critique about it. So yeah, I would say that's its value.
Well, even alone, I mean, you just critiqued a bunch of it. I mean, by yourself, which I don't usually hear a lot of filmmakers do that. So in that vein, very quickly, we're going to do 3 snippets, and very quickly, if you could explain what's going on in these snippets. We won't necessarily be able to hear them, but in post, we might be able to show a little bit. So real quick, this is from Chapter 4, Elemental Fire. And I'll ask you what's going on afterwards.
Thank you for
so right now,
when I fell.
Goodbye, love.
We're watching the dwarves blow out the candles.
Thank you.
You can kind of see the rain.
So cute.
Oh, who's that guy?
Doesn't seem right.
But now my question in all of this is, when I just watched it for the first time today, and being a part of the production, it's very interesting to see it. So quickly, did you initially have the intention of having people hear these voices while just seeing people listen? because that's the first thing I picked up on, like, as a through line in all of these. You're seeing a lot of people listen, almost more than you see them talk.
Oh.
Was that intentional, or, I mean, no, not was that intentional, but was that what you envisioned in the beginning for that specific scene with the dwarves and the candles?
I think, no, that's interesting you start with that one. So fire in particular was like the most, I made it after New, like after that.
Yeah.
And it was particularly I would say the most like co-authored with the team.
Yeah.
With y'all, like the performers, and also with the cinematographer. I gave them way more reign than I usually ever gave them. They were also the same person that shot New.
Okay.
So I already knew they did a really good job, and I liked the way that they did it.
Yeah.
So in terms of intention, I think what is achieved with that is like it's developed in the edit, and I also like to do that, like find out what happens in the edit and what that does in terms of like hearing things, like the overlay of sound.
Yeah.
Kind of creating this non-linear, more atmospheric.
Yeah.
So when I edited that together, really like this person said, this see them say it. It doesn't really, it's not anywhere near so evocative. Then you kind of like, versus getting a sense of the space, because sometimes when we experience something or remember it, you don't remember it perfectly linearly.
Yeah.
You remember fragmented, and I think it's really nice to try to capture that in a movie.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay. We'll move on to the next one here. So this next one.
Oh.
Chapter 2.
Thanks for choosing this shot. This
Earth.
took a lot of color correction.
So here we are.
What are you doing?
And then we have her say, "What are you doing?" And then you have all the women right
Tell
there.
us what you're
now,
doing.
my question is, when you say color correction, I'll get to the initial question. When you show this, and we talked about this before, when you show this in film festivals, do people usually laugh when she says, "What are you doing?" at that point? Because
There's some titters, yeah.
I cracked up when I saw that, and then I thought about it, and I was like, "Why am I laughing at that?"
So when I showed it like individually,
Yeah,
men would always laugh at that part, and the women wouldn't laugh at that.
yeah,
But in the group settings, people do tend to laugh at that.
okay,
Because I think it's kind of like, it's like, I get it. It's like a surprise. Like it's like in the interruption, we laugh at a different trajectory.
yeah,
Like something suddenly taking a different trajectory. Yeah.
But I mean, my immediate like deduction to why men are laughing at it is because that's not something that we have to worry about. Somebody creeping up on us and touching us.
Well, I also think that it is a way to divide yourself from the character of the prince.
Yeah,
So when you laugh at him, it's kind of like, haha, idiot. I won't do that.
that's not me. Well, in our
Oh,
limited,
there's like an aspect that's just, even in a gentle way. Yeah, it's just kind of like a way to create some separation there.
yeah, which I would assume that as men, we want to believe that we're separate from that behavior, or that we're above it. That's not me. I don't do that. And then when you get down to it, it's the idea of, well, when you look at the amount of sexual assault and rape that occurs in the world, I mean, it's by and large by men. So, and then I also think I reflected on this idea doing theater on like intervention, educational based theater, and talking about sexual assault. One guy came up to me and said, "Yeah, people were laughing a lot throughout the scene. You know, when you're talking about something very dangerous and really personal." And I said, why do you think that is? And he said, well, in our limbic systems, if we need to escape, we either we laugh because we want to be present from the situation. And I've always thought about that, especially when that happened there. I'm like, oh, I'm trying to escape the situation. I'm so uncomfortable. I'm trying to fly away.
Yeah, I mean, I think we know laughter is a response to discomfort.
Yeah,
for sure. Yeah.
Does that disturb you at all to have audiences laugh at that part?
No, I think there usually has been when in a group audience, it also has largely shown to non-male audiences.
Yeah.
So depending on the context, if it was a festival that I had to, or say was in a panel of films that was already deeply misogynistic and oblivious and careless, and it played in that context and people were laughing, I think that would be disturbing. But there's also an aspect of it as not male people, there's kind of a catharsis to it.
Yeah. Okay.
So I think there's a catharsis to the laughing too. Because you could be getting this set up as this is something heavy, or whatever reason do we have to watch.
Yeah.
God damn. Yeah. So then there's kind of there's a relief to it. Yeah. And I could feel that in the audience. There's the relief of men getting to laugh at it, but then there's also just the relief of the character getting interrupted and getting held to asked what he's doing. So the relief is kind of in the audience in an interesting way. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay. And then last clip from Chapter 3, Elemental. Now, this shot, not that one.
What if you were already whole? Without any changes and without anybody else.
Voiceover happening.
Okay. Was that Finn VFX or was that practical? What was that?
You asked that.
What was it?
I built that out of a yoga mat.
What? You built a fin out of a yoga mat. Okay.
And that was me flipping. I was floundering in the water for half an hour. Because Erin was way too cold if you saw so that was Lake Superior, and it was the end of October.
That was in Lake Superior at the end of October, and you're still alive. Oh, and my
Erin,
Lord.
because poor Erin had to go down in her shoulderless to do that lift up shot. So but once she did that, she wasn't doing the tail flip anymore.
Yeah, I think we're done here. Thank you.
So I think I made her forgive me a little bit since I was the one who did the tail flip, and then we were both breathing.
Yeah.
But yeah, oof. Tim carried me out there. And we chose the spot, and then he carried me out there, and we could see it on the monitors. We knew we were in the right spot, and then he went back to shore, and then I floundered in the water trying to flip my tail because it wasn't the best built thing. It was a yoga mat and tail flippers, so water would kind of get in from the top, and then it's hard to maneuver it.
It looked great,
but
though.
That one, perfect.
Nailed it. Okay. So to wrap up, where do you hope to go next with your films, or what's the next project that you have in mind?
I'm doing a couple of projects right now. I'm doing a short film, and then I'm editing a feature, but it's a documentary.
What's that called?
Sunflower Man.
Okay.
Can follow it on
all
Facebook.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think my move, and I don't know exactly how it will happen, but I think moving to longer form things and things that have more structure, in place for distribution or exhibition or like kind of the ability to make the return on investment.
Yeah.
Even if it's like unlikely, at least that infrastructure is more there with like feature length stuff or episodic stuff compared to short films.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. And where can people check out your work right now?
On YouTube.
Yeah.
And Facebook and Instagram, or they could go to my website, directedbysimone.com.
And if they wanted to search you in any of those places, they just type in Directed by Simone.
Directed by Simone.
Directed by Simone. Well, thank you so much for taking the time and energy today. I appreciate it. All right. That's a wrap.